Okay, now the recording has begun. My name is Will Hull, and this actually will be Unit 2 for Idaho for Division D and for the We the People National Finals. In a moment, I'll have the judges introduce themselves, followed by the students, and then we will begin the hearing. Students will deliver a 4-minute prepared statement, followed by 8 minutes of judge follow-up questions. My microphone will be muted during the hearing. However, I will be holding up a 1 minute as well as a time sign to let you know when those periods have happened during the hearing. And I also suggest for your view on Zoom, up in the very top right-hand corner where it says view, that you set that to a gallery view so that you can see all of the judges as well as your teammates. And at the conclusion of the hearing, the judges will give some brief feedback, and then we will conclude overall. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to the judges so that you can begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Julie Silverbrook. I am the Senior Director of Partnerships and Constitutional Scholar in Residence at iCivics.
Good afternoon and congratulations for being here and getting all the way to the end of the day. My name is Tim Igo. I am a lawyer, writer, and editor of a monthly magazine, and I'm at the State Bar of Arizona in Phoenix.
I'm Nick Drummond. I'm an assistant professor of political science at Black Hills State University in South Dakota.
My name is Sergey Zamray, and our teacher is Blake Godet.
My name is Heath Arnold, and I am a junior at Meridian Medical Arts Charter High School. And like she said, our teacher is the great one and only Blake Godet.
Hi, my name is AJ Kalinowski. I'm a junior at Meridian Medical Arts Charter High School. And like I already said, our teacher is Blake Godet.
Great. I will go ahead and let you know that you will be answering question 1 this afternoon. I will now read that question to you in full. What were the major disagreements among the 55 delegates during the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, and how were they resolved? What issues, if any, were not resolved, and what were the consequences? What changes, if any, should be made to the Constitution? You may begin whenever you're ready.
The disagreements amongst the delegates at the Constitutional Convention were the struggle for money and power. We all know that the Constitutional Convention was called to abolish the Articles of Confederation. Virginia had said that they were unfit for running a country and were unfair to the larger states and gave the little states too much power, further stating that there was so little justice in the representation given in the Articles of Confederation, and then they suggested equal representation in the future legislative branch. This gave the larger states the power that they wanted and created the lower house, which we now call the House of Representatives. The smaller states, wanting power too, seeing at their larger disadvantage, demanded that one of the houses has complete equal representation, which we now call the Senate. This desire for power has now created our current legislative branch. Slavery was another disagreement that also went along with the struggle for power. The southern states, taking advantage of the representation per population, advocated that for their slaves to count as part of their state's population. Northern states had said that this wasn't reasonable since they had slaves considered as property. However, although this was an issue for them, the danger of loss of trade for tobacco and other products, a compromise was then offered that a slave tax was given to the federal government and that 3/5 of the slaves were counted toward the state's population. This shows not only the desire and disagreements for power between the states, but also money. Money and trade between the states was more important than morals, which is what really made the discussions between the delegates only about money and power.
The major issue that was not resolved in the Constitutional Convention was the issue of slavery. Although it was a major topic at the convention, it was still very unclear what the status of slaves would be in the future. Southern states used the agreements in the Constitutional Convention to boost their population in order to gain more seats in the Electoral College. As the 3/5 clause became enacted, it did not actually benefit the cause of the abolition. It rather allowed for states to instead create their own rules on taxation, representation, and commerce when it came to slavery. This granted even more power to states with a high slavery population. It took several more decades until the act of slavery was federally abolished, even though it was a hot topic during the Constitutional Convention. Regardless of the movement, both abolitionists and slavery defenders came to an agreement that a federal imposition of the abolition of slavery would put America back into a system that they had fought against, also known as the large British centralized government. Both Federalists and Anti-Federalists agreed that the government should not impose a slavery ban until 1808, which is very contradicting to the message that the abolitionists gave at the Constitutional Convention.
As Thomas Jefferson had said, I am not an advocate for frequent changes in laws and constitutions. The laws and institutions must go hand in hand with the progress of the human mind. It's a common idea that the Constitution is a blueprint without a clear understanding of the meaning behind each writing. By including in the enumerated powers of Congress general phrases like provide for the general welfare and to make all laws necessary and proper to carry out these responsibilities, the framers left open a hole for future generations to decide what the true limits of the powers are. Because the U.S. Constitution is so abstract, it has to adjust over time. This would be in line with the theory that while constrained, abstraction leaves space to grow. The need to amend their articles more frequently means citizens end up being more invested in them. The Constitution should reflect the era and become moldable. A changed Constitution should likely address environment, the internet, protecting identities, and the rights of Native Americans. We add to the Fourth Amendment that people have a right to be protected from surveillance. While the government is not physically spying on us, there's very little protecting people from online. Clarify that Congress may pass the Second Amendment. Clarify that Congress may pass legislation to control the sale or possession of assault weapons and similarly regulate other forms of firearms, treating the Second Amendment in much the same way we changed the 18th Amendment on prohibition by adopting the 21st Amendment when we found its original purpose was misused.
Great, thanks. We are now going to ask some questions. I would like to get a sense of some of the structural changes you might want to see in the Constitution. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on a current legislative proposal in the US Congress now to add additional justices to the United States Supreme Court. Is this something that you support? Why or why not?
I can take that one. So I feel like that it's a better way for our voice as a people to be to be better represented. The more the merrier. So like I feel like if there are more judges in this in the judicial system with the Supreme Court, correct? So I feel like if we just put more people into the that court system, then we'll have a more accurate voice of the people.
I can go from there. I think that in general, allowing for more justices to go into the Supreme Court has been an idea that's been around for a while. With the current status of our political environment, allowing for more representation would be a good thing, but you have to ensure that it would not actually benefit one side rather than the other, since we have such a already advanced system of Republican and Democrat Party. It wouldn't be fair just to put 5 more Democrats on it to completely swing the entire decision making of the Supreme Court.
And we believe that this would be okay because the number of Supreme Court justices is not really set by the Constitution. So a change in the court's amount of justices they have does not require a constitutional amendment. It says in Article 3, Section 1, that the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in the one Supreme Court, and in such inferior courts such as Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. So since it does not specify the number of justices, that just leaves the issue to legislation to be passed by Congress. And otherwise subtracting and adding judicial seats is a power in the legislation.
Great, thank you. I'll invite my colleagues to pose questions they'd like to ask to the group.
So let me ask you about your thoughts on the advantages or the opposite of creating term limits for members of Congress.
I can answer that. I think for in general, the idea of allowing for term limits is a good idea where you allow for other people to voice their opinions. I believe that we have, I believe in the House of Representatives, we have a 2-year term limit where they're constantly going back up for, actually, I think it's in the Senate now, where they're constantly being put back up for re-election. So I think in general, where we have in our political environment, you're going to have always people assume that it's never their state's fault, if that makes sense. So they're always going to vote once again for the same person repeatedly. And I think a term limit would be a good idea in general to allow for more equal representation of people.
I'd also like to add on to that. I feel like our society today is so uneducated in government and the policies of the politicians that they vote for one person one time and then they just keep voting them based on the D or the R next to their name in the ballot. So I feel like it's just really up to, I feel like a term limit is a good idea because then we can get more people and just newer ideas into our government so that we can really just uh, push those new ideas farther into our society.
In my view, I think it's difficult to overstate the extent to which term limits would change Congress. They are supported by large majorities of most American demographic groups, and they are primarily opposed by incumbent politicians and the special interest groups which depend on them. Term limits would annihilate many of America's most serious political problems by counterbalancing incumbent advantages, ensuring congressional turnovers, securing independent congressional judgment, and reducing election-related incentives for wasteful government spending. And perhaps most important, Congress would acquire a sense of its own fragility and temporality, possibly even coming to learn that it would acquire more legitimacy.
Thank you.
Really taking things in a different direction, going back to the convention again, one of the major points of contention there and after during the subsequent debate that occurred in the newspapers between the Federalists and Anti-Federalists was the question of the size of the Republic. How big, how small? Can you say something about this debate? What were the major disagreements and what side of the debate would you support?
The major disagreements were, like we talked about, was well, those were discussed at the convention, was what we talked about in our prepared response. But the disagreements that went between the Anti-Federalists and the Federalists was basically the Anti-Federalists were talking about how the Constitution could not do well in this, how the Constitution would fail and how it would not work. The Federalists were advocating for it would work and that it was just the best system, you know, in the world. So I feel like what the Anti-Federalists and the Federalists talked about the most was just the structure of the executive branch, which was in the Federalists. I think they're in the Federalists of 40. They're in the 46 through 48. I know those ones talked about the executive branch, and I know a lot of them talked about just how the executive branch and legislative branch would be set up.
Let me follow up with maybe pushing more so in that direction, a little more clarity. The Madison Federalist 10 essay, very much worried about majority factions, right? He's arguing that a large republic is going to be somehow the key to all of that. What's going on there?
I'll go. I think in general, I really like how you brought that up. When we talk about majority factions, democracy was a pretty big topic when they discussed during the Constitutional Convention. And it's something that our group also discussed on our own time. Basically, the idea of mob rule exists in our elections, where they were also discussing representation as well. The one vote per each state, regardless of their size. So the entire argument of majority factions, basically, it stems from, once again, what I would say, representation in our republic, right? Should we have more representatives for a higher population, more representatives for a smaller population? And as a group, I think we agree that the more representatives you have, the more you're going to be representative. And you're going to not stem into political factions because there's more people for you to vote for, and there's more people that fall into your political ideas, I guess.
Great, thanks so much. We are out of time. This is now a little bit of opportunity that we have to give you guys some constructive feedback. I really liked how you kicked everything off by trying to put the convention through the lens of money and power. And I would have really loved to see you bring that theme all the way through all of your answers. I think you started pretty strong with that theme, but would have liked to, like I said, really see more of that in there. I would have liked to see a little bit more on the actual decisions that were made during the convention period. But I think you did a nice job of talking about some of the changes that you would make specifically to the Fourth Amendment and Second Amendment. Would have liked to see a little bit more exploration on structural changes to the Constitution. I think when we asked the structural questions, you tended to fall back on political arguments rather than constitutional arguments for those changes, although you rightfully identified that Congress can alter the size of the Supreme Court absent a constitutional amendment. That is absolutely true. Overall, I think you guys did a nice job. You had a fairly even participation across the group, which is always really good. And you were always trying to build off of what your teammates were saying. So you should be very proud on the job well done.
I will follow up on that. I also was struck by what, for me today, was a unique approach, a unique thesis of the money and power. So that's a very, very strong opening. And it's hard to carry through with that, and you did that, so well done. Definitely got our attention. I liked there was some good constitutional article citing. And a few things I would have liked to see explored more were, you talked about that the founders left open for future generations the answers to some of these questions. It wasn't always clear to me if you thought that was a failing of theirs or a feature that's a positive, that they intended this to be something, or if they just weren't able to complete the task with the political environment they were in. And I also found it interesting to mention the Second Amendment and compare it to changes from prohibition like the 18th Amendment. I was left wanting more to hear about that, but well done. Thank you so much.
Enjoyed the opening remarks. I thought it was very well polished. I could tell you put a lot of work into that. I also noticed and appreciated the teamwork, how you all seemed to jump right behind one another, really supplementing one another in a way that was insightful. So well done there. I did enjoy also hearing about the surveillance state. I don't think we've heard that yet today. And for me, that's one of the most important issues. So very, very happy to hear that that's on your minds as well. I like the point, AJ, about how with the term limits and the question of when we vote, we tend to blame other representatives. It's not our person who's the problem. I think you're absolutely right about that. The data does bear that out. The question I had asked about the size of the Republic, the majority faction, I thought you circled around it a little bit, didn't quite get to the heart of it. The Anti-Federalists were worried that too big, too large, it's going to be the civic virtue is going to break down because of that. But Madison's going to flip that argument on its head and say, hey, actually, that can also break apart majority factions, prevent them from forming and throwing their weight around in the legislature. So other than that, I thought everything was well done. Nice job. I appreciate it.